Hello, hello, hello. It's me, Michelle, your host and pocket DJ of Coffee Fueled Stories, a show where storytelling and coffee hang out. Today's special guest is Jack Finn, and we're going to do something a little bit different today. We've got a whole lot of coffee to try, and we're going to do a live tasting, and we're going to talk books, coffee, and horror. So, welcome to the show, Jack.
Thank you. Thank you. Really happy to be here.
This is awesome. So, uh, I do want to preface something. Um, you, when you sent me your request, like I said, you made my day. You were like, you were like, I'll send you coffee. Now, you don't have to send coffee to be on the show, but it's definitely a bonus. So when you said you'll send coffee, I was like, yeah, I want to talk to this guy. Let's do it. So
Well,
thank you for that.
I figured coffee is such a great icebreaker. And what better way to start the conversation with a little taste test, send you some of like my local favorites from here, and then just go from there.
Absolutely. So, and being in the PNW, I mean, come on, it's Coffee-landia. I mean,
Yep.
this is what we love about being in the PNW, right?
Yep.
So, how long have you been in the PNW?
Since 2021. I came out here in November 2021, so just under 4 years.
Nice. So, was it for a job or was it for a change of scenery? Like, what brought you to the PNW?
It was kind of a combination of the two. I had an opportunity to come out here for work. We were living in Florida at the time. My wife is a lifelong Florida resident. And so we packed up the car, put the dog, squished him in the back next to a bunch of the luggage, and she looked miserable, like what is going on? What has happened to my life? And we drove cross country for about 2 weeks, and then showed up here in the greater Tacoma area. And it's the that was one of the ways that I actually started when we before we started this trip. We said, well, we're making such a change. We're moving to. I grew up in New York, so I'm an East Coaster, and so making this big change, we said, well, we should anything we've ever wanted to do, let's do it. And one of the things I always wanted to do was to write. And she encouraged me. She was like, all right, well, when we get out there, you're going to write a book. And that was how my debut novel started. And we came out here. We've done all kinds of crazy hobbies and things that we've wanted to do that's been on our bucket list for so long. And the writing has just continued. It's kind of taken off. It's been cool.
Oh, that is so cool. So, okay. So now, did you always know you wanted to be a writer, or is that something that just kind of came to you a little bit later in life?
I always loved writing. It was something that I always wanted to go into. Growing up, it didn't seem like but it was a passion of mine, but it didn't line up career-wise at the time. I was always a voracious reader, and I spent the bulk of my career has been in the military. I was an intelligence officer for 2 decades, and very similar to Alma Katsu, and I've heard her talk about her experience as well. And it's kind of a weird thing because in the military, you read and write differently than you do in the outside world. You almost it's almost a changes the way you do it. And to this day, I still struggle reading wise for enjoyment. Before growing up, I always read for enjoyment. It was something I loved to do. Especially as an intelligence officer, you read voraciously still, but you're looking through it and you're scanning through it for very particular things. It's not really, it's much more of a business mode than enjoyment mode. And I've almost had to work to retrain my brain differently to be able to read and take my time and find that enjoyment in reading again. I do a lot of audiobooks for that reason, but the same thing for writing. I wrote a lot before I went to the military, and then once I went in there, you write on a very distinct, different type of writing style, and which doesn't wouldn't would be horrible for a reader to read a book written in that kind of style is not enjoyable. So again, I had to kind of retrain my mind to write in a back how I used to before I went in.
Very cool. So, then you and I are literally going to be talking literally the same language. I fell in love with SOPs in the Air Force.
Yep.
I didn't know I loved process writing because it's very process
Hmm.
driven. And so little did I know, my mom and my dad, they're very, so first off, they were clean freaks. and they always had a system for doing things. Like the house was very systematic, and I didn't even know this until, much later when realizing how things just kind of fit into my life. My mom would she would first off, she put things in the pantry in a certain way. She would go grocery shopping in a certain way. She would put the groceries on the counter away, and like everything was a system. So I grew up in this very process oriented environment without even realizing it was very process oriented. And then when I got into the Air Force and I saw SOP, so I was in supply, I was a supply weenie, and I loved it. And anytime I had a question, my boss would literally tell me, go to the books, go to the
Right.
binders.
Right.
And the binders, there were like 30 binders. And I'm like, oh, where do I even start? Like, where do I even? And so I was like, okay, well, I guess I'm just going to start with the first one and see what it says. And so, like you said, it's a very different style
Hmm.
of thinking and structure, but it worked with me and I loved it. And it's not for everybody. It's not. It's not for everybody. And then I got stationed in Turkey and we had an auxiliary position. So again, I was in supply doing my little warehouse work, but they assigned me an auxiliary position and it was at the compound headquarters. And I had to learn how to do the memos. And I
Hmm.
was this little 23-year-old airman doing like we had the top secret room like with the red light and like we
Yep.
had the binders and they're like, okay, the base has just been, so they would mock with us, the base has just been overrun by XYZ. You need to inform so and so and so and so. Who do you inform? And so we would get tested and they're like, and whatever you do, do not hit the send button. So, there we were pulling all the binders, sitting in the little
Yeah.
room, going, okay, this happened. Okay, so this is who we send the letter to. This is who we notify. And I just loved it. There was just something, again, it was very structured. But like you said, reading for pleasure is not like that
Yep.
at all.
Yep.
And it's not for everybody. It really isn't. So you must be very process oriented as well. Like you just like this certain, or was that trained? Like,
It was definitely trained. I am a disorganized person, both physically and mentally by nature. And I know you talked about like your mom growing up. My mom's going to listen to this podcast later, so I'm just going to say she was a wonderful, wonderful woman and the perfect mom. We'll talk offline about anything else.
it
But
sounds good.
but yeah, I mean, so it took a lot for me to get organized into that kind of mindset, especially like in the military, you work in PowerPoint, which you're writing not even a full sentence.
Yeah.
And doing that for over 20 years structures your mind to think that way. But it has really been a pleasure to get back to really writing for enjoyment and descriptively and using more than 5 words in a sentence. And I've enjoyed it. It's been a really great transformation. I'm thrilled that my wife pushed me in this direction to like, no, you wanted to do this, do it. And I struggled. The first year of writing my debut novel was tough to kind of get the words out the way I wanted to get out because I was in the kind of transition from that very SOP oriented mindset to writing for a literary mind, for someone to read it and enjoy it and get my words out in a way that's descriptive. And so it was a bit of a transition that first year, and now I feel much more comfortable. And I'm sure I'd put together a horrible PowerPoint if I had to do that now, which is so I guess I've retooled my brain back to my origins, so it's good.
That's awesome. So now, when you were doing your writing process and you were literally you're switching your brain into this more, flowery descriptive language, more than 5 words, right? And punctuation. So kind of walk us through your writing process. Like, did you sit down and just, bang words out just to try to get the thoughts out? Like, how did you go from that mindset to enjoyment?
I play a lot of it out in my head beforehand. I do a lot of sitting and thinking of like what this is going to look like in the story, and I feel that it kind of, fortunately, when I've got stories working, I'm using all that RAM in my brain for like storing like, hey, I've got it all written out. The movie is played and it's my head, and I just have to translate it into words. But it's interesting when you first start writing. really for your own. You know, you've grown up and you've read so many different writers, and when you start writing, you realize, wow, I don't sound like any of them. You know, you don't sound like a Stephen King, which everyone reads growing up, and you think like, well, maybe I'm not doing this right. You know, and he's very descriptive. He's very, very, very descriptive,
Yes.
and And so you sit there and you think like, wow, maybe this is not very good, you know, like, and you struggle with like, how do you get a character from one room to the next? You have to kind of lay this all like you have to like walk it out. And I had an epiphany at one point because I was really like getting felt like I was getting bogged down in the story. I knew the story I wanted to tell, and I was getting bogged down with a lot of the detail of like, all right, well, how am I going to get them from point A to point B and stuff? And I kind of came to the realization, like, you know what? I just want to tell a good story. And when I had that and started to write just what I wanted to get the story out, my own voice kind of came through. And that has kind of been my writing style. And that's what I tell people, like, when you write, don't look at it and say, like, oh, I don't sound like Stephen King or I don't sound like Stephen Graham Jones. That's a good thing, right? That is a great thing. You don't want to sound like so you want to sound like a unique voice in the space. And it's been very enlightening and it's really brought the enjoyment, you know. And I'm not as nearly as descriptive as like a Stephen King. I kind of go along that Tolkien mindset of I want to put the story out there, the dialogue out there. I want to leave a lot of descriptive details for the reader to make it their own. And so it's a great experience for me when I run into someone that's read one of my stories, one of my books, and they relay it to me, and the story is the same, but their experience with that story is completely different. And I think to myself, like, you know what? That's successful. You know, it's you know, you want it to be like when a director makes a movie, you don't want the viewer to see the scene the way the director does. You want it to see it through their own personal experience. And that's why I think I've felt the peoples that connect with my reading style, my writing style, take that away. I mean, there's some people that love that description, that love that like level of Stephen King level description. And you know, that's how you get people that gravitate towards one story or the other. And so once you find your voice and it should be unique in its space, it's a much happier writing process. It flows. I'm much more prolific as a writer now, and I'm much more comfortable with what I put on paper. My grammar and editing is atrocious, atrocious. And but luckily there's people for that, right?
Yeah.
There's people,
Yes.
yeah, there's people that you could pay good money. They make an excellent career making me sound like a literate human being. And I greatly appreciate that. And I think my purpose is to think up great stories and relay them, and someone makes me sound that I speak English as a first language, you know, which I do. But hopefully, it looks like I write English as a first language, and I've been very thankful for the people that have spent excruciatingly amounts of time being like, no, that's you don't use a comma that many times in a sentence, or no, you don't punctuate, or that's not how you do things. But I figure I'm a storyteller, not a writer per se.
Okay, Jack, seriously, I love that you said all of that because, okay, so yes, I literally wanted to be like, preach while you were talking. Because, yes, storytelling, like the ideas, the words, like the thoughts, that's what's important
Hmm.
to the storytellers. And like you said, there are people that get paid to put the commas, to put the
Yep.
periods, that's their job. Their job is the structure.
Hmm.
Our job is to tell the story.
Right.
And that was one thing. So when I was going to school, when I went back to school, because I went back, I did the military first and then corporate, and then I went back to school. So I was a very old student compared to, my peers.
Yeah.
And I'll never forget this. So, especially because I switched from journalism to English. And journalism, same thing. It's a very structured, very basic, very simple. So that's why I gravitated toward it. I loved it. It was very, it has a process.
Hmm.
English, very different, very flowery, ooh, right? And so when the day that I learned the difference between a prescriptivist and a descriptivist, my mind was blown. I was like, okay, so the prescriptivists are the ones that do the commas. They're the
Hmm.
grammar Nazis, right? The grammar police, if you will, pardon me. And then there's the descriptivists who are us. We're like, hey, check this out, and they're like, check this out.
Yep.
So the day I learned that there's that, and that's okay in English. There's a word that describes the two different people, and I was
Hmm.
like, got it. as long as you can tell a story and you have ideas and you want to share it, yay! And then you pay
Yep.
people to do the things.
Yeah,
So,
exactly. Exactly.
yes, that's why I was like, reach Jack. So, yes. But yeah, absolutely. And it's not to say that there's a right or a wrong way. And I really love that you said, like, find your voice. Like, again, I was like, yes. So, and that's like one of the hardest things is to find your voice.
Yeah.
But once you do, it's the sky has parted and the right, like, you, and then you can just go. You can just keep going in that avenue because you're like, this is my voice. This is how I'm going to tell my stories.
Yep.
So I love that you found that, and especially because you had to switch and you did you literally went like, it's a complete 180, like it's very different. So that's really cool. So you said you grew up in New York.
Yep. I grew up in
Now,
Long Island, New York. If,
okay,
if I'm not careful, my accent will sound like Fran Drescher from The Nanny. So I have to make sure I say horror with an R at the end and not an A at the end. And I mean, I work at it. It's one of my daily struggles, as my wife tells me all the time. It's horror, not horror.
okay, I'm a sucker for the New York accents. I am. Like, I'm sorry, but the best pizza and the best bagels. I
Yep.
like you like I miss that. Like that was like one of the first things I ever did was, my stepdad and I, we were stuck in New York for a layover, and we had 8 hours to kill. So what do? You eat. You got 8 hours to eat, and we're like, let's shove some New York food in our face. So, so I'm a sucker. And can I just say, I love the Greek coffee cups.
Hmm.
And I learned a very hard lesson, and you're probably going to laugh at this, and that's okay. So I didn't know there's coffee black and coffee regular. I didn't know this was a thing. So again, that same day, because I've only ever been to New York that one time.
Yeah.
And so yeah, we were sitting at this really cool church, and there was a coffee cart. And so I was like, hey, why don't I go get us a coffee? Because we had been walking all over. And so he was like, yeah, sure. And he was like, black, no sugars, right?
Yeah.
And I was like, I know how you take it. I know how you take it. I'll be right back. So I go, I order the coffees, didn't try it, didn't look at it, nothing. Just ordered the coffees, came back with my two little cups. I was all proud because they were the Greek cups.
Yeah.
And he took a sip of it and he was like, what the hell is this? And I was like, it's coffee. And he's like, this is not coffee. And we looked at it. He took the lid off. He's like, there's cream in it. And I was like, I didn't tell him cream. I just ordered two coffees. And then the sweetest New Yorker heard us and he's like, there's a thing called coffee black and coffee regular.
Yeah.
So I learned a very hard lesson that day.
Well, it's funny. I didn't start drinking coffee until after I graduated college, and it's at the time I was a dark, and I still am a dark chocolate fiend. And I thought to myself, like, this is probably not healthy for me to eat as much chocolate as I want to eat. And I said, coffee seems like it would be a close substitute for chocolate. So I'm like, wow, and I take my coffee black. So I'm like, this that kind of has that bitter taste to it. It's perfect. And then I realized there's mocha, which is coffee and chocolate. And so I kind of just fed both addictions at the same time. And so so Starbucks, I'd go there and cafe mocha. I'm like, well, I'm getting coffee, I'm getting chocolate. And then I realized that's like 1,000 calories a cup. And so now I'm back to black coffee again. But yeah, that's how I became a coffee drinker. I was just like, oh, this can't be good. At some point it's gonna catch up to me eating all this chocolate. And then Starbucks reeled me in. They just reeled me in with that mocha.
Right? Oh my gosh. Oh, duh. Okay. So, since we are on the topic of coffee, shall we do some tasting?
Yes.
All
Well,
right.
I'll explain my choices. I'll
Yes,
explain
yes, yes, please,
what I picked.
please.
So I picked the first one I picked was Sumtown, which is my favorite local one. That's his favorite Seattle area coffee. Yeah, and I sent this both the nitro cold brews. I made sure there was no milk. Everything is either oat milk or black. Um, and then I got, which I have never tried before, the happy, because I figured coffee makes us both happy, so that would be an appropriate one to add in the mix. I added a little. Vietnamese coffee to give us a little international flavor to the conversation. Mine is black and yours is, right? Yeah.
I have
And
the
then,
oat milk, yes.
yep, oat milk. Mine is vanilla and black. And then I finished it off with a rise organic coffee to sprinkle a little health on the conversation there. It's organic, so it's got to be good for you. So those are my choices for our coffees for the conversation.
Awesome. So they're nice and chilled. I've got them in a little container here with a little ice pack, and I've been drinking some water for a palate cleanse. So because I did brush my teeth. I know you're not so technically you're not supposed to brush your teeth and then drink coffee after because it stains. But
Yeah.
I ate a Mediterranean breakfast and I was afraid I had tabbouleh in my teeth, tabbouleh and falafel, so I had to brush my teeth. So so I tried to make sure I drink plenty of water so my mouth I don't have any weird flavors in there. So which do you have a preference for which one you would like to go with first?
Nope. Well, I'll let you choose. You
You let
pick.
me choose. Well, you did mention so mine is actually a mocha.
Yep.
So the one you sent me was the mocha. So do you want to go ahead and try the rise? You want to
Sure.
try that one right now? All right, so bear with me. Hopefully I don't knock over my mic opening it. Come on now. Oh, nitro. Gotta love that sound. All right. Cheers to you, Jack.
Cheers. You too.
All right. Oh, that is good.
That's pretty good.
Oh man, that is tasty and delicious.
And
It's
organic. So it's to me that's like a vegetable, right?
yum, right? It's healthy. It's salad.
It's exactly. This is one of the
Salad.
food groups, one of the food groups today.
I like that. Mm, that is delicious. Yum. I like that. So this is the oat milk mocha by Rise. Very tasty. Thank you. Thank you for
Yep.
that. So now, like I said, we're going to be doing this is an unscripted show, so we're literally just going to start going off the cuff. But I did want to ask you, and you did mention about being in the military. So I saw that you were on the Horror Writers Association under the military. They actually gave you a little highlight being a veteran. So did they reach out to you? Did you like how did you how did that come about?
So this was, if I remember, it was last year. I think it was in the last year, or the year before. I can't remember which year they did it. For Veterans Day, they wanted to reach out and they sent the message out like, "Hey, any veterans in the organization, please send us your information. We want to highlight you for your service." So I sent it up to them, and mine was one of the ones that they selected to focus on.
Very cool.
Yeah.
So now my okay. I don't know if this happened to you, but when I was working in corporate, I was afraid to tell my coworkers that I wrote horror flash
Hmm.
because I was afraid they were gonna look at me differently. Like, oh, you're you're like you like that gory weird stuff, you know? Now, did people know that you were like into horror? Like, did you talk about it with people at work, or did you just kind of keep that to yourself?
I pretty much keep it to myself. My big fear is someone's going to read it and be like, the guy that got eaten by the troll, he sounds a lot like me. Is that me? And that's always my fear, because there's always that temptation, right? Someone really gets under your skin and you think like, oh, I could fix this.
Right?
I could fix
Right?
this. You're going to meet a werewolf tonight, and then you think like, well, if they read that and they're like, huh, that sounds a lot like me. So yeah, so I try and keep the two universes separate as much as I can, you know, for that reason.
Totally.
But but it's true. It's funny because horror gets a definitely a bad rap, overall, and I think because horror.
It's okay. I love it. I'm gonna encourage it. I'm gonna encourage it.
I think as a genre, it's more of a catch-all than a true genre in of itself. It's I remember John Carpenter had said that horror is a reaction, not an actual genre, and
Yeah.
I think there's a lot of truth in that. What the difference between horror and a lot of other forms of literature or fiction is that it doesn't pull its punches back, right? You're at the end of the day, every author, every movie maker, is trying to tell a story. They want that they in some cases there are things that are just pure entertainment, but in most cases, when someone puts that level of time and effort and themselves into it, there's a greater story that they want you to walk away with. They want you to see the visceral stuff, but they want to tell a story. And usually in horror, you're peeling away layers and I think Stephen King once called it the truth beneath the lie. You know, we look at things in our society, and horror pulls away that truth and it pulls away that lie to show you the truth in a very unflinching manner. And you see it, and I've often said, you know, by that description, I think Margaret Atwood's *Handmaid's Tale*, it it not only is it one of the best books I've read, it is a true horror story. You know, if you want to read something
Yes.
and feel horrified, Margaret Atwood it has created the perfect piece. And what she's done is she's peeled back that lie in society to put a truth, unfortunately, a truth that we see more and more in the everyday world. And that is truly a horrifying tale. You know, now and that's what horror looks to do. I think she's done it better than most people because most people don't realize they're reading a horror book in a lot of ways when they read *Handmaid's Tale*. Just like most people don't really consider like *Jaws* a horror movie. No, it's a shark movie. But you get the message, don't go in the water, right? The overall message. Don't swim, you know. But yeah, don't go to the beach on Amity on summertime. But but you know that she got it. That's what she did. She told a story that horrified readers, that peeled back the lie to tell you a certain truth that becomes, and because she wrote that based upon the experiences that women had during the Iranian Revolution, and even the eyes in that story were based upon Ceausescu's Secret Service. There's a lot of fact in *Handmaid's Tale*, even in that time when she wrote it in the early '80s. And that's really what gets that's what an author is trying to do. They want you to walk away and be like, wow. You know, not just be entertained. They want to stimulate your mind to think of different things. And I think that is the beauty of horror, is that you watch a tale and it's whether it's a coming of age tale, whether it's, you know, these stories, you look at Sinners recently. Sinners talks a lot about the social cultural aspect of the South during that time period in overlaid with a vampire story, you know. But you walk away and hear when you hear people talk about it, they don't really talk so much about the vampires. They talk about the story overall. And to me, that is really the beauty in horror. You see everything with its true grittiness and true darkness, and you walk away with like, wow, that was an incredible story when it's done right. When it's done right.
Yes. Key point when it's done right, yes.
Yeah.
Because otherwise it's just, gratuitous gore. Which, it's not about, sometimes, we want that, but for the most part, we do want the story as well. That's very important.
Yeah, and I think that's what causes a lot of people to think they don't like horror. You know, they say like, "Well, I don't like slasher films." And well, sometimes I think, "Oh, slasher films aren't really horror." I don't know what genre you would put it into. True horror, in a literary sense, to me, is something that is telling you a story and making you like gasp with horror. You know, like he's like, "Yes." You know, this scares me on many different levels. It scares you on the visceral entertainment level, and it scares you on a much deeper intellectual level. And I think there's so many authors. Paul Tremblay does really well. Stephen Graham Jones does really well. They tell great spooky stories with a tremendous amount of social commentary in there that makes you walk away and really think, right? You want the aspects of the story to linger with you, both the scary aspects and the true horror that the of the reality that the writer is trying to get to you.
Absolutely, absolutely. And when you think about it, summer slashers, the teen slashers, like they did have a message, right? The message is, don't get drunk and don't have sex, right? I mean, so
Very
if you
true.
think about it, and then so like you can break it down to like really simple like concepts, but at the end of the day, it is a story. And
Yeah.
that is the beauty of horror. It also has, like you said, all of these other different elements
Hmm.
in there. And the point being, wow, like you said, you gasp with horror because you're like, holy shit, that just oh wow,
Yeah.
like and I think that's probably I don't know, but like that's the draw, right? Like
Right.
besides just vampires or whatever type of horror, like there's the spore, what do you they call that, like mushrooms and body
Oh,
horror,
they
like
like
you
the
know.
eco terror. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah. I mean, there's so many different subgenres of it now. Like it's crazy, which is, like mind-blowing because as a 15-year-old, I literally only had two authors that I was reading, Anne Rice and Stephen King. Like that was it. And like when you read those and like you told your friend, like my best friend was the one who turned me on to Anne Rice. I was reading, we both fell in love with Stephen King, so we were talking about Stephen King. And then she's like, "Have you read Anne Rice yet?" And I was like, "No, what's that?" She gave me Interview with a Vampire, and I was just like, "What is this?" 15-year-old. Like, so anyway, we could probably go down a deep rabbit hole on that. All right. So, being that coffee,
Yeah,
we've got a lot of coffee to try,
we
and
do. We
we
do.
had we did the first one, and it was delicious. So what shall we try next, Jack? What are you feeling?
Hmm. Should we go international? Try the Sang coffee, the Vietnamese
Sure.
coffee.
Yeah. All right, here we go.
M-
All
Mine is
right.
a vanilla black.
All
Yeah.
right. And this is the traditional oat milk. Yeah. Here we go. I always want to make sure I don't like, splatter all over my computer and microphone and my desk here. So, oh no, it didn't quite open all the way. Ah. All right. I'm gonna do something I don't normally do. I've got my little EDC here. So
Yep.
I'm gonna just tap that down a little bit in there. So uh, I just need to open it a little bit more. There we go.
See, I have mine as well in case in case the same thing happens.
Yeah, so
So
this
we're caffeinated and armed. This is bad.
yes, this is awesome. So I can't take credit. So my best friend, he is Army Special Forces. This was his EDC.
Oh, very
And
cool.
Um, I have had this. He gave it to me. I met up with him in Rome. He was working at the embassy, and he somehow, I don't know, we got to talking about EDCs, and he was like, "I want you to have. I want to make sure you need to have this on you." And I was like, "Okay." I was like, I'm cool with that." And so he gave it to me, and I don't know, there was just something really cool about it because. I was like a special forces guy, even though he's my best friend. I've known him for like 30 years. He's giving me a really cool EDC, like, and I don't go anywhere without it, Jack. Anywhere, like it's like a part. It's as important as in basic training. You had your ID card, and you
Yep.
like like there. It was like a part of you. Like if you accidentally left it on the table, you felt like you were missing your arm. You know,
Yep.
like
Yep.
that's how this is. I have it. It's always right here. Always.
Yep.
I don't know. It's part of you. All
Well,
right.
once you get out of the military, when you walk outside without a cover on, right? You have that feeling of like, oh no, even now, I feel like, for anyone that's listening, I mean, when you go outside, you're covered at all times, So once you walk out as a civilian, you're like, oh, I feel like I'm like naked from the head up, you know?
It is. It's so weird. There's just like there's just these things that are just again it's part of you. It's part of your being, your essence. And then when it's not part of your being and your essence, you feel like you are literally missing a limb. It's weird.
Yep.
Yeah. All right. So I saw you had a sip of yours. I haven't tried mine yet. I was busy chit-chatting, so I'm sorry. Oh, that's good. It's sweet. This one's
Is it
a
good?
bit
Yep.
sweeter.
Yeah. This one's a little sweet too. This has got the vanilla in it.
But that's good. Mm, yeah. All right, so we've had, oh, I just noticed on the rise, it says fuel your mind on the side. Being that this is Coffee Field Stories,
Yeah.
hello,
All of that. Perfect. Perfect. Yeah.
right? So here we go. So we've
Perfect
got,
product branding.
right, so we've got two in the books.
Yeah. Two in the books, two on deck. I like it.
Yeah, I love it. All right. So
You know,
hopefully,
we were talking about slasher slasher books and slasher films, and I think it's an interesting subgenre within horror. Because I think it's they all get compared to each other, you know. And I think Stephen Graham Jones did it really well in I Was a Teenage Slasher, in the sense that all the tropes that are in a slasher movie or slasher books are almost knowns, right? And so the challenge I think to someone writing a slasher horror is to take those known tropes because they're almost expected, right? You want them, and sometimes like in the Scream movies, they would play it off of like this is what's going to happen next, and it's a separate art form within horror because when you write something of that nature, people kind of expect a certain expect to encounter certain things within the story, and I think the art form that comes in with slasher horror it is to modify that in new and unique ways. So I think in and of itself, that becomes the story in and of itself. You know, you try and do similar things over and over again to a degree in unique ways, you know, and I think that's like I said, I thought Stephen Graham Jones in his I Was Teenage Slasher was did a phenomenal job of taking it from, you know, someone that like knew all the stages as he was transforming and recognized all the stages of becoming a slasher and I thought that was pretty interesting. So but I didn't want, think I inaccurately said that it's not horror, but it's a different type of horror. Sorry, the hate mail will start in my inbox as we speak. No, I meant that it's a different, it's a different genre truly within horror because it's not necessarily telling a parable like the way that some other stories do. It's an art form of creating a slasher tale and engaging the reader in different ways because they expect the story to be a certain type of story. All slasher stories, whether it's a clown or Jason or Freddy Krueger or whatever it may be, all kind of play out along the same lines. So, and people, if you enjoy that subgenre, you want to see it in a different, unique ways. And I think that's why the storytelling trope is very different than you see in some other aspects of horror, where they're not necessarily they're trying to do it's a different art to it, I think, altogether. You know, you're trying to do it, trying to tell something that's familiar and different at the same time. And I think that's a real unique form of horror.
I yes, like and I love so I grew up watching I was exposed my family, my parents, my very organized parents loved horror. And so I grew up in, you know, they were watching 70s horror.
Mhm.
I was exposed to it a little bit. I wasn't supposed to see some of the things that I saw, but I did because you know, but kids, you know, they sneak in and you're
Yep.
curious to know why is it you're not supposed to watch this. And so my parents would be watching, you know, the on the TV various horror shows. And I just remember thinking like why are they watch I was 7 years old. Like Alice Sweet Alice. I mean that's like a
Wow.
throwback.
Yep.
That I think that's 1977, 1976,
Yep.
something like that. And I don't remember the whole thing. I just remember there was like a little girl, a mask, and blood. Like that's literally what
Yep.
my 7-year-old brain remembers. And all I thought to myself is like, why are they? And like I could hear them screaming. Like my aunts were over. Like it was like a big thing. Like they would come
Yeah.
over, they would watch movies, and I'm like, why is this exciting? Like in my 7-year-old brain, I'm like, what is exciting about this? Like why are they watching these films? And then I kept getting exposed to it more and more and more. They kept watching, you know, Last House on the Left,
Wow.
The
Yeah.
Hills Have Eyes. Like, I mean, these, like I said, they loved, they loved this stuff,
Yeah.
and I got exposed to it knowingly and unknowingly. Um, and so it just kind of led, you know, I it wasn't that I was desensitized, but there was just something about my family, I associated it with family. I know that sounds
Hmm.
weird, but
No, that doesn't.
I associated watching horror movies with family.
Well, you
Um,
know, movie nights, but you know, growing up, movie night, like when you'd watch it, you know, we watched Jaws, we watched the Thing, you know, but you know, to
yes,
me at the
The
time,
Blob.
yeah, exactly. Yeah, oh, Stephen
Yeah,
McQueen and the Blob was
come
one of my
on.
favorites, or in them. Well, you know, you grow up with a lot of horror. You know, even as a little kid, you grow up with kind of like the Abbott and Costello meets the werewolf and stuff. But I always talk about, you know, growing up for me, like there was. You know, you have Creature Feature on Saturdays or Creature Double Feature if you're lucky. And those are monster movies, right? But you don't think of it
Yeah.
even as horror. That's Godzilla and the Creature from the Black Lagoon. They'd have Monster Week where you'd have a full week of like King Kong, Son of Kong, Mighty Joe Young. and you just watch it, you know. And
Yeah.
so my parents, when we would have movie night with, they had HBO when cable first kind of came out, and
Right?
we would watch like The Car, you know. And to me, I didn't think of The Car as like a horror, or Christine, or all the Stephen King movies, right? Cujo. To me, it wasn't a horror movie. It was just the movie we watched, right? It was I
Hmm.
remember seeing The Thing in a drive-in, you know, and you don't think anything of it, right? Like that's just the
Oh,
movies that you grew up on. And then as you get
yeah.
older, though, there were, and my parents were very good. And again, they're going to listen to the podcast, and I'm going to get a call after this. But you know, like I said, we had HBO, and they're really good about like letting me watch most things. If they thought it was too scary or something, they wouldn't let me watch it. However, with HBO, I quickly learned if HBO showed a movie at 8 p.m., they showed it again at 1 a.m. So I knew to set that alarm. And then right now, my parents are going to be like, I knew I heard the TV in the middle of the night. And so you go downstairs and that's how I watched Phantasm for the first time. You know, Phantasm was really scary. My parents
Yeah.
watch it. Well, here I am sitting between like 1 and 3:30 in the morning watching Phantasm, exactly with the ball.
Mhm.
And for years, that final scene where he closes the door and the tall man standing there and goes, boy, and he gets pulled through the mirror, that terrified me for years. And there was,
Right?
I cannot tell you, I was probably in my 20s before I felt that I could close a door and there was going to be some tall mortician waiting to pull me into the other universe. So, but yeah, but you didn't think of it as a horror movie. Like I don't think I categorized movies at that point. Like Alien was like, it was just a cool movie. I mean they were just so good growing up.
Mm.
And then when I was a teenager, one of my best friends worked in a video store. And at the time of working, I think you get your work permit at like 15. And so he was old enough to rent out, R-rated movies, but we weren't old enough to go to an R-rated movie. But at the end of his shift, he would bring them home and we watch them in his house. And so it was kind of, I think part of it is that like, wow, we're not supposed to watch this, and it gets the Return of the Living Dead. And well, I will say Dawn of the Dead, and I was just talking about this the other day. Dawn of the Dead was the first movie I think that I realized horror because I was a little kid and I started to put together a little pack because they all go the next morning. They go to the mall and they clear the mall, and I didn't live that far from the mall, and so I started to plan like when the zombie attack happens, how am I going to get to the mall? What am I going to bring? I wasn't going to bring my little sister with me. That wasn't a thought. Like, hey, we had a good run. It didn't work out. But I was going to make it to the mall on my bike. I tried different routes. I'm like, oh, this road might be kind of busy. That's, I think, when I started to realize that, like, maybe horror, there was a little more to horror than just entertainment. Because I started to think, like, wow, if that happened, what would I do? And the Mid Island Mall wasn't that far from me. So I figured, okay, I had my little sack of things I was going to bring, and I was going to go live at the mall until the SWAT teams came and cleared everything. So that was probably when I started to realize that horror was more than just entertainment. But
Oh
I'm sure
my,
she'll listen to the podcast too, and be like, I knew you weren't going to bring me to the mall when the zombies came.
it's hilarious. Oh my God. So, uh, okay, bonding and horror movies. Like I think that might be like the theme, and with coffee as our sub theme. Um, my mom again. So there's something about my family and horror movies, and her favorite one, and she watched it every year, was Night of the Living Dead.
Mhm.
And that was like our favorite. That was her favorite movie, and then that became like our thing. And she was like, "Honey, please don't eat mommy. Like, please don't eat." And I was like, "Well, I'll do my best. I can't guarantee if I become a zombie, I won't eat you. I can't make that promise." I mean, some of the conversation, like if anybody was just listening, they would be like, "What is wrong with you people?" I'm like,
Well,
"It's just mom and daughter bonding. That's all."
it goes back even to when you're in the military. In the military, I always feel one of the things I miss the most is the conversations you have in those long periods of boredom, right? Are the most important conversations you feel like you've ever had in the world. Sometimes it's like, should Ben Affleck be allowed to play two superheroes in different genres? Or other times it's like, if we all turned into zombies, who would we eat first? And that conversation is like the most meaningful conversation of your life at that moment. I remember times I did 3 tours in Afghanistan, and there are times when nothing happens, when you're just sitting and there's just nothing going on, right? No one's shooting anything at you. You're not shooting anything at anybody else, and you're sitting there. You got nothing to do. You're in the middle of nowhere, and these conversations you have about like who would win, Freddy Krueger or Jason, and that is the most intense, most important conversation you ever had in your life up until that moment. Right. And but those, I love those, right? I mean, because it is, because the level of arguing that takes place and the amount of like emotion that goes into, no, Jason would never beat Freddy Krueger. He could, you know, there's just nothing. I don't think I've ever had conversations ever again in my life that rival those moments on deployments when you're sitting there in some like insane amount of boredom and monotony, having this intense conversation. And a lot of times it's about horror movies. Who would win? Who would survive? If someone came here, which one of us would make it? Who would go first? Right? Like, well, would I go first? You would go first. And you have these like just great, great conversations that you remember for the rest of your life. And that's to me that
Nice.
is what I connect most to my military time are those conversations. And I try and put when I write in a story and there's characters that are in that moment of monotony. I think that conversation that gets filled, if they're really connected, is going to be filled with the most inane conversation about something totally crazy. And I try and incorporate that because that's an aspect of life that I love is those conversations. You're like, man, I remember that guy. I remember those dudes almost coming to blows over whether Superman could be Batman, and it's just such a great point. And I try and relay that in my writing whenever the opportunity arises and it's appropriate to put it in there.
Okay, I love that because that was actually one of the things I wanted to talk with you about was, some of the conversations. Um, I I'm my writing is very different from novel writing. And I I fear that because I don't know it. So, but I'm gonna conquer that fear. I will get there. So what I wanted to ask you about though, because again, this is why I love talking with authors. Conversations, like to me, conversations, because Stephen King is very painful with his conversations. He will have a character ask a question, and then
Mhm.
like 3 pages later, the character will answer. I don't want to do that. That is not my voice. That is not how I want my characters to talk. And so that's what I want to know. Like, what is it when you're creating a character and you're having your characters have a conversation? Like, what goes through your mind as you're creating these conversations for your characters? Would it be like that story, that type of thing that you're just discussing?
Yeah, it's a difficult balance sometimes between relaying aspects of things, especially if you're trying to imbue some historical knowledge or some contextual information, and working that into normal conversation. You know what I mean? Like if you're having conversation back and forth, you're not gonna be like, well, in 1865, a vampire lived down the street. That's just not normal dialogue, right? And so that's a challenge about like incorporating that stuff into there without making it sound. And Stephen King does. He lays out a lot of that narrative in the story, and that's a challenge, I think. But one of the things I enjoy about writing is I enjoy the interplay between the characters. And sometimes that interplay winds up I like a character more and I keep him in more of the story because I enjoy their interplay with the other characters that are there. And I think that goes back to those kind of conversations of sometimes conversation is more than just a transfer of information. Sometimes it's to give you that feel for like who these characters are and how they relate and what they talk about. And if you get trapped in the like question, answer, relay of knowledge, it gets I think it's very monotonous. Like I said, Stephen King's been very, very successful and it works for him. I think it's one of the reasons that his books and short stories translate so well into film is because there's so much narrative information, storytelling for a director then to condense that down into something that's more digestible. I mean, his books are daunting, for young readers. They are like, I started off with his short stories. I read with Night Shift and those, and I love his short stories. His books, I've always kind of struggled a little bit through because of that long narrative process. I grew up on stories that were like The Hobbit, that there's a lot more like story moves much quicker along and much more is left to the reader to interpret. I love Stephen King's movies. I think as a storyteller, he is unrivaled. Some of this stuff is just incredible. Uh, his writing style I do struggle with as a reader sometimes in some of his books, but I think he's exceptional in all ways.
Absolutely. I too started with short stories. Skeleton Crew.
Yeah.
I read Skeleton Crew, And we just saw The Monkey yesterday, the movie. And I was explaining to my partner, I said, I read this story when I was 15. It was a short story. I don't remember much about it, other than I was 15 years old and it messed me up. I just remember being like messed up about this monkey. And so we were watching it, and I mean it's just gory and it's violent, and I was like, I don't remember how accurate, I don't know how accurate this is, to the story, because again, I read it when I was 15. I'm 55 now, so there's been a lot of time between this movie and that story. But I just remember at 15 just thinking, fuck that monkey. Like that's all I remember. And we watched the movie and saying, just fuck that monkey. Like just no
You know,
way.
I used to love watching Stephen King movies and waiting for his cameo appearance. Because remember, he's still a little,
Yes.
he'd always be like the ticket guy at the train
Yeah, yeah,
station,
yeah.
or he'd have some goofy line or something like that.
Yeah.
And he'd also be cool to like, that's Stephen King.
Yeah.
And
Creep
I always thought that
show.
was kind of cool. Yeah, yeah, I thought
Yeah.
that was really
Yeah.
cool.
Yeah, no, same thing. I didn't see him in this one. I don't recall seeing him in this one. This was from 20, I think this was a 2016 movie. But sometimes like think about it, and so I wasn't paying attention. I was not paying, so it's very possible he made his appearance, but I don't know. But I just remember like thinking The Mist, The Monkey, and it. I read like six of his books in a row,
Hmm.
as a teenager, and then I kind of had to put a break on it. I remember I joined the military, and I was like, you know what? I've read six Stephen Kings in a row. I'm like, I'm gonna I'm gonna give him a break. I'm gonna read something. So I picked up Splatterpunk. Don't know what I was thinking. Discovered Splatterpunk and Clive Barker, and I was like, good Lord, what is this? Why am I reading this? But I did enjoy the Midnight Meat Train. Same thing. I
Yeah,
just was like, this is a twisted story. But just being exposed to that and learning that there are so many different types of horror, and it's and I love that it's not just so like you were saying, like monsters, creature features. There's I Dracula and Frankenstein are my two absolute favorite books. And they clearly were not horror, as they that wasn't, the genre that they were created under.
right.
But to your point about you gasp in
Hmm.
horror at the like when you close that book and you're like, wow, what a
Yeah.
story, and so that's why those two, even though they're technically not considered horror stories, those are like my two favorite like books, like, but I stick them in like several different categories,
Yeah.
of horror, science fiction, things of that nature. And that's a testament to storytelling, you know?
Yep.
Sorry, got really deep there.
No, no, but it's true. But it goes back to Carpenter's quote that horror is the reaction, right? And if it
Yes.
creates that reaction, it has a place in that genre. And it's funny when you talk about like splatterpunk. One of the great things about being a horror fan, and it's because and what to me what a horror fan means is that you're open to all these different subgenres, and you find like the beauty and artistry in each of the different subgenres. There are people that if they're not familiar with horror, if they pick up an extreme horror novel or splatterpunk, they're gonna be like, "What is this?" But if you look at it and you see the true storytelling and mastery that's in there and get that appreciation for it, and that's one of the great things I think the horror community overall is very open-minded to like looking at these genres and appreciating it for what it's supposed to be. And I think a lot of people try and label horror a certain thing or look at it a certain way, and they miss it. They miss the forest for the trees. And it's but it's horror is one of those things that bridges all gaps, right? Like we're the same age. We can run into someone that's 18 years old on the street with a Pet Cemetery shirt and have a conversation like we've known them for 30 years.
Yes.
And horror has its own language. If it's if you say like we all float down here, anyone that likes horror knows what
Yeah.
you're talking about, and that bridges the gap. I feel that's different then I've made that argument before, and some of my friends are like, well, Star Wars is the same way. I said, no, it's not the same way because they say like, oh, these three movies are different. Those three movies in horror, it's a shared language, right? And
Yes.
when you go to a horror convention, you could have people from young kids to the elderly, right? And everyone
Yes.
speaks the same language, right?
Yes.
We're all equally weird and
Yes.
strange, and that is one of the coolest things. I went to Crypticon just a couple months ago, and it's just such a cool experience to be like, you know, just to be around folks that are willing to look at stuff and appreciate it for what it is, right? And
Yes.
the crazier it is, it's just great. I love the horror community. I love being part of the horror community, and I love contribute. That's really what I do as an author is contribute stories to the horror community.
That's awesome.
When I find people that read the books and they enjoy it, I'm like, that's great. For years ago, if you told me that anybody would have read something I wrote and been like, "Hey, this is really good," I'd be like, "Nah, I don't know. Who paid you?" But like so now to for the fact it never ceases to amaze me that people buy my books and read my stories and connect with them. When growing up, you just think, "Well, I'm just some weird kid who wants to," right? And it is, but it's great. It is. I think it's the greatest community. You could have so many conversations about so many different topics. And like I said, when you're in deployment and when you're deployed with a horror fan, you guys have crazy, crazy
Yes.
conversations, but they are the best ever. And
Yes.
you know, I love it. I love running to other writers and readers and just people that enjoy and appreciate the community is such a great feeling, and I love that, now we have podcasting where you can reach so many more people and people can listen and connect because I think it's important for people that maybe aren't like, I didn't grow up with a lot of people that were horror fans as we would know them today, right? Like
Right.
a Stephen King movie was just a Stephen King movie. You didn't really consider it a horror movie. Jaws was just a shark movie. It wasn't like a horror movie. Um, but you could sit in your room and your parents could be like, no, horror is bad. It's going to ruin your brain. And you could listen to a podcast, be like, no, you know what? There are other people like me that are out there and there's nothing wrong with me. This is cool and other people think it's cool and I'm just as cool. And I think that's a great aspect of what social media and the internet and stuff has done is it's enabled people to connect with the community and be like, hey, this is pretty cool. I don't have to read like Anne of Green Gables to feel like reading something quality. I could read Stephen King or I could read, anything. You could read any horror author's book and be like, wow, there's a whole community of people that feel the way that I do. And I think it's amazing.
Absolutely. And that's probably so, you know, when I was younger, watching the movies, the only connection I had to, the genre was my family, not realizing that there were other people that, were into it as much as, my family.
Yeah.
And to your point about it opens, it has opened doors that I didn't know. I'm not afraid to see what's behind the door, I guess you
Yep.
could say. I did a zombie walk one time in Long Beach when I lived in Southern California. And people brought their babies. They dressed their babies up as zombies. And the baby, I'm not gonna lie, Jack, the picture that is like burned in my brain is the zombie baby sitting on zombie Santa Claus's lap. And because it was two different families, there was a zombie Santa Claus and there was a zombie baby family, and they saw each other like the Santa and the baby, like they were like, "Oh, can we put the baby on?" And I'm not lying. All of us saw this and we all took a picture of zombie baby on zombie Santa's lap, and we just thought it was like the most hilarious thing, and it just, I don't know. It was like wrong, but at the same time, it was hilarious, and nobody was getting hurt. Like it was,
Yep.
we were trying to be the largest zombie gathering in Southern California. We were trying for a World
Yeah.
Record. We didn't quite make it, but it was, again, it was really cool. Here we are, a whole bunch of strangers, just dressed as zombies, trying to make a world record. It was nice to know we weren't alone.
Yep. Well, living in the Pac Northwest, when you go out in the woods, and we know there's bears in the woods and there's mountain lions in the woods, but you always think like, well, what else is out here, right? And people like, there's nothing else out there. But then you read some books, you're like, you know what? I'm not the only one that thinks this way. There's other people that think that there's things, you read Max Brooks's Devolution, and be like, see, when I hike up a mountain, when I hike up at Mount Rainier, there's things out here. Other people think there are, and um,
Oh,
and that's such a great connection to make. You know, what I mean, because it's, I know, I love it. I love the everything about the genre, is just so cool, and it's the fans and readers and the creators are just phenomenal, and it's such a welcoming community. There's when
yes.
I first started writing, and you're just this lone author out there, and you're welcomed by so many people, and so many people are willing to like help you along and give you a shout out for your book, or give or connect or talk to you, or even be like, hey, I'd love to read it and give a review. It's just such a welcoming community, and I'm happy to be part of it every day.
Absolutely. And when I found out about HWA, same thing. I was like, wow, there's a group of people who are willing to help and share and connect and support. Like that is because as you were saying, like, before, growing up an only child, I wasn't exposed to, writing was something you did as a hobby. Like you weren't going to try to make a career
Right.
out of it. So I got very involved in everything very, very, very late in life. And then to find out that there are these, great communities out there who are willing to share and support and, guide you even. Like
Yeah.
they have the mentoring, they have scholarships. Like HWA is so much more than just a group of us who like the same type of movies and books. Like they do a lot to try to, encourage and lift up and share and support. So yes, I can't say
Yeah.
enough about HWA and the horror community. So I sound like a PSA.
No, I went to a HWA function last night. Claver Moon had his for Rain Shadows had his book release, and down over at Two Finger Social down in Seattle, which is a horror themed bar, very very cool place, and the whole place was just packed with horror creators and horror fans and horror readers, and it's just such a great time. It's a great time to connect with people where you've read their books or you've seen them. The only contact you've had with them has been on through social media or something, and it's just a great organization. I'm really happy to be a part of it, and looking forward to StokerCon. It'll be 10 years at StokerCon this year in Pittsburgh, next year in Pittsburgh.
Yeah,
So it's yeah, it's just a cool organization that has done a lot for the community overall.
for sure. All right, so we've got two final cans to break open here. We've got the Stumptown and the Happy. So, which one would you, how about we save Stumptown for last since you said that's your favorite, yes?
You want to end the show with happy?
Oh, we can end the show with Happy either way.
On a happy note,
On a
would that
happy
be
note.
a
Okay,
I
so
like it.
we're gonna try the Stumptown. All right. Gotta love that nitro sound. All right, so here we go. Oh my God, I smell like the second I cracked it open, I could like it just was this waft of
Yeah,
coffee. Oh my God.
it's really good. Whenever I fly out of Seattle, I go to that Florette over in Gate A, and they sell Stumptown coffee, and so that's my travel goodwill that I do. My good luck charm is have a little Stumptown coffee before every trip, and I love it. It's really good.
Nice. Yeah, and it says good luck on the can. How cool is that? I was taking I was like, I've never actually paid attention to the label at all. This is my first time trying it, so it's very
And it's local, so I'm always down for supporting local roasteries.
for sure. Coffee black. We got a coffee black here, right? Because
Yeah.
there's no cream, no sugar,
Yeah.
no mistake. I didn't it's not a coffee regular. This one is I think this one has chocolate, notes of chocolate and genius, the happy one.
So we're getting smarter just by drinking coffee. This is great.
Right? Right? All right, here we go. I'm gonna go ahead and crack open the happy here.
Okay.
Like I said, I'm trying not to, we're only trying 4 cans of coffee in an hour and 15 minutes here, so
It's it's early in the day. At least it's early.
This is why we scheduled it early. We had a lot of coffee to drink. I couldn't imagine doing this at 11 o'clock. It would be different if
No.
I was in the military. I drink a lot.
Yeah.
I'm not lying. I probably drink like pots of coffee. I don't even want to know what I was doing to my body back then. It didn't matter. I had a job to do, so it got the job done. But now I can't do
So
that.
so I was in Navy, and one of the things that the in the Navy you don't wash your coffee cup. I don't know how you don't all. So that the coffee cup gets like darker and darker and darker with grime. I don't know. My immune system must be on must have accelerated dramatically from 20 years of unwashed coffee cup. But and I know people are like, oh my God, that's disgusting. But that is what you do. Your coffee cup is shows your markings, right? Like that's how you know that you're salty. Is your cup's been around the world and has had brew like stuck to the side. I know that
I love
that's
it. No, I love it.
it.
Do you still have any of your mugs from back then?
I do. I have since washed them because that is.
Well, yeah.
I but at the time, if you were on a deployment, you started off with a fresh, mug, and then by the end, that coffee looked like you had grown sunflowers in it. I mean, it was,
I don't,
it's one of those traditions. You just do it, and like when you walk around, and someone's got a fairly clean cup. They just got in theater. If someone's got their coffee looks like it's like had dirt in it, then you know that they're pretty salty. They've been around for a little while.
I
So
love it. Okay, so see, this is there's just something about the military and I just there's things. I mean, talk about like I mean, it's a special club. It really is, right?
yeah.
And this is funny because even though I was in the Air Force, I love Navy sayings like smooth seas never made a great sailor. Like that just resonate. And then here, hopefully I can do this without like knocking over all four coffees. So, but I have an
Oh, very
anchor.
cool. Yeah.
So, I don't know. I don't have airplanes. I don't have, none of that stuff. But for some reason, Navy, I love the Navy history, especially when it comes to coffee, right? Like you hear like Cup of Joe, you know, what the true story is, I don't know, but I just love that there are so many associations with coffee and the
Yeah.
Navy. I don't know. I just love it.
Yeah, when you go in the Chiefs mess on a ship, all the Chiefs have their coffee mugs hanging on the wall, and that is their mug.
Right? And you would never like you don't even want to you don't even want to point at it like, oh, that's no, 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 that's you just
Yeah,
look
that
at
is
it.
you don't. Yeah,
Just look at it. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah. Yeah. That's so cool. All right, so we've got the happy here.
yeah.
There we go. Happy. Like you said, we're definitely happy. I'm feeling happy.
Happy.
It says seriously. Oh, you know what? I didn't do a palate cleanse with my water. My bad. Sorry. I might have had a little bit of Stumptown in there, so I'm gonna have to go back for a second taste. Hang on.
Which was your favorite of the four?
Mm,
I'll let you retry the happy first.
Let me retry the happy here. I might have to just go back and do here. There we go. And then we got this one. That's a tough one, Jack. I so Rise, I've been exposed to Rise was one of my favorites. Like I drank that
Mhm.
when I was living in Orange County. I really enjoy Rise. And that one's a mocha. This one's very sweet. The saying is nice and sweet. I don't know. The Stumptown, I don't know. Now that I think about it, I'm like, maybe the Stumptown, you're onto something here.
Stumptown is my favorite. Though knowing that Rise is listening, I probably should say that they're tied. Not gonna say they're tied at the. But yeah, Stumptown is I think definitely my favorite.
Okay, what
It's
if I,
close. It's close, but there's
right? I'm gonna do something really weird here. I'm gonna try to take a sip of each one.
at the
And
same time.
yeah, okay, so okay, I can't laugh because it's gonna come out my nose. Sorry, I just had a coffee can suicide in my mouth.
I was gonna say,
I'm not really a fan of the coffee can suicide. They're much better individually,
yeah, yeah. I'm
but
not gonna try that. I'm gonna
I
keep mine separate.
I don't recommend. 0 stars. Don't do it. No, it's all of them are really good. So in case all of them are listening, because
That's right.
I'm gonna share this with all of them, but each one has they're enjoyable in different ways, and
Hmm.
they all have enjoyable flavors and notes, scent. Like each one has a different like it's I like them all. As far as I'm concerned, they are all equally delicious. Like they all have something to bring to the table. Like,
I
you know,
agree. I agree.
they are. So thank you for sharing this. This was truly a delight. I was not expect when I seriously thought I was gonna be like one little can, and I was like, oh, okay, we're gonna have one. We're gonna try one little can, and it's gonna be awesome.
No, dude,
So
we're
you really surprised
like the
me.
Pepsi taste test. We had to be all encompassing. Like I said, I put some thought in it. Went to my
You
favorite,
did.
went to a little international flavor, and then a little organic to sprinkle a little health on it. And then I figured happy was perfect way to end the taste test with.
I love it, and I like I said, I can't thank you enough. It was a true delight talking with you. Learning about you and your process and your writing,
Thank you.
and that's that's the beauty of not just the horror community, but podcasting and connecting with people, and you sharing your story. So thank you so much for taking the time to share your stories and your books. Thank you for that.
Thank you. No, thank you for having me on. It was I love this part of the community. I love talking with other fans of the horror community, and I love just talking about the genre overall. And that's there's so much to talk about. There's so much great stuff. There's so many brilliant new artists coming out every month in this community that uh, there's just so much. There's so many new voices and there's so many exceptional voices that are coming out that it's just a great time to be a horror creator and a horror reader. Hope I added the R to my horrors on
You
those, but
did,
that's
you did. And like I said, I'm gonna encourage the New Yorkness because I've got a special place in my heart for New York because like I said, coffee black and coffee regular. Like you don't learn that anywhere else other than there. So again, thank you. I wish you all the best.
Thank you.
Thank you again for hanging out, and I'm so happy that your wife encourages your process. There's
She
nothing
does.
better than being like having the support of your spouse. Like that's so important. So kudos to your wife, and since your family is listening, Jack is a great guy. I'm sure he was a fabulous kid. So you guys did a good job. So kudos to Jack's parents.
I appreciate that.
It was a good kid. I know it. I can
you've
feel
helped
it.
me more than you can know.
I am sure of it. I believe it in my coffee loving soul.
I'm telling you, my mom's gonna be like, I knew he snuck downstairs and watched TV. I heard that TV.
It's okay. It's okay. It's all you turned out good. You turned out just fine, Jack. You turned out just fine. So again, thank you for all of these fabulous coffees. I've got all four here open. I'm gonna share them. I promise I'm not gonna try to drink them all at the same time. I'm gonna give my body a little bit of a break here. But
Okay.
so this episode will drop on Friday.
Excellent.
We'll be sharing. I'll be sharing it on Friday. Here, I'm gonna stop. Actually, no, I can't stop recording because you haven't said the tagline yet. So the tagline is "Go forth and be magical."
Oh, go forth and be magical.